Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. I'm Eric Anderman. I'm the chair of the Department of Educational Studies in the College of Education and Human Ecology. And I want to welcome you and thank you all for coming to the 2015 Carlsberg Charters Lecture. We do this lecture usually annually, sometimes every other year, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about that and the wonderful people who made this possible. But first, I'd like to say a little bit about our speaker, and I'm not going to speak too long because I want her to have the time to speak. We're so delighted to have Dr. Janet Kolodner here. We actually started emailing, asking if you could come. It was quite a while ago, and you're still at NSF, and she said, "Wait till I'm done at NSF." So we did, and here she is, and we're delighted to have her. Dr. Kolodner was Regents Professor, is now Regents Professor Emerita of Computing and Cognitive Science in the School of Interactive Computing at Georgia Institute of Technology. And we specifically asked her here because this year, Dean Ochterberg, who's the dean of our college, wanted the theme of this talk to be about technology and how technology interfaces with learning. There is so much going on in our college and the university about technology, and one of the things that is most important to us is not simply using technology for the sake of technology, but using technology so that people really learn from it. And Dr. Kolodner's work, as you will see, and as many of you know, really is at the interface of cognitive science and computing, and to really create materials that really help people to learn the way that people best learn from what we know about learning. One of the things that I'm particularly most excited about is that when I got to meet her is that she's the founding editor of the Journal of the Learning Sciences, which is a really cool journal from people in my field. It's a great journal. And I remember one of the first articles I read in there was in, I thought it was the first issue, but she told me that's not the second issue, by Anne Brown about design experiments. It really changed the way I thought about research. It was a real aha moment. And it really introduced a new way of thinking about doing research on human learning to the various fields that teach about and do research about human learning. She has a bachelor's degree in math and computer science from Brandeis University, PhD in computer science from Yale University, and she just stepped down from a nice stint at the National Science Foundation where she was heading the Cyber Learning and Future Learning Technologies program. So she's going to have some really exciting things to share. I want to just say a couple of things real quick about the lecture. This is called the Carlsberg Charters Lecture, and there are two different people who have made this possible. Penny Carlsberger was an alumna and of our college who really had a lifelong commitment to education. Her husband, Raymond Carlsberger, established this fund to commemorate her career as an educator and to support the exchange of new ideas. And Werrett Wallace Charters was a professor in the College of Education before it was the College of Education and Human Ecology, known in particular for his contributions to American education. And he's particularly remembered for leading the War Manpower Training Program during World War II. So those two funds we have used the last several years to bring in some really exciting speakers. And I'm going to stop now and ask you to please welcome Dr. Janet Kolodner.
Thank you. Thank you. Can everybody hear me? Yes, good. Okay, so 2.5 years ago at the International Conference of the Learning Sciences in Australia, I gave a talk in which I said, you know, guys, we've been a failure. There have been no changes. We've been building these technologies. We've been studying learning for such a long time. And basically, school is the same as school was when we were growing up. And there's not a whole lot that has changed. And the technologies that have made it into the classrooms have either not made it or have been pretty uninteresting. And, you know, we still have people throwing, saying, oh, we use lots of technology in the classroom. You know, everybody has an iPad, but, you know, they don't know what to do with them. What I said then was that I think that the reason that we haven't made the progress, you know, the impact that we want, is not so much because they're not computers in the class, in everybody's classroom, because now we have the iPads and they're going to be in there, or the tablets, and they're going to be in there in everybody's hands very soon. The issue, I said, was that it was an issue in academia, that we're all working on our little thing, and there's this myth that you can take your little thing from research and actually it's going to be robust enough to take it out in the world and have people use it without you being there, okay? And we really haven't figured out any infrastructure or done anything to help us to bring those pieces together and make the big integrated wholes that people need in order to be able to say, hey, yeah, you know, it's worthwhile bringing that technology in. The kids will be able to take notes, and they'll be able to read, and they'll be able to collaborate, and they'll be able to run simulations and make models and keep lab notebooks and this and that and the other, you know, all within the same framework. When we get to that, I think people start thinking about the computer as being the learning technologies they want to use and want to have in school. So what I want to do is move forward. This is kind of the sequel to that talk. So I'm telling you now that that was the message then. I said then that what was lacking was our will to actually make this happen, and that some of us had to start doing it. And we certainly had to be educating our students, some of our students, to start doing this integrative thing that I was talking about. So I just retired from Georgia Tech, not because I'm ready to retire, but because I'm ready to go on and do the next thing in my life. And that next thing in my life is actually going to be this thing that I told everybody at ICLS, at this conference, needed to be done. So I'm going to be the chief engineer of 4 to 6, I don't have the funding yet for it, but I'm going to be the chief engineer of 4 to 6 big integrated projects that show people what can be when you integrate technologies, different technological functions with each other in the right ways, in ways that invite nice pedagogy. You integrate that with curriculum that extends over long periods of time. You get the right teacher professional development going so that you're actually implementing these things the way they ought to be implemented, so that people can learn and show the world what's possible. There's a big PR thing that has to go around this, but show the world what's possible. And I think I've learned that there's some other things that are important to making that, you know, that making success in terms of having impact. And I'll save my last statement about what's necessary to my last slide. But I want to tell you my claims right now. Okay, these are what I'm thinking about. I think that there are 2 big game-changing ways that technology can impact education for good. And I'm not simply talking about formal education. I'm talking about the places where educating happens. It happens at home, right? It happens in all kinds of places. And those 2 big game-changing possibilities are that technology allows are role play in different kinds of scenes and scenarios and narratives that people would not otherwise be able to experience. And the other is in allowing learners to experience and play around with situations, phenomena, and processes that they wouldn't have access to otherwise. You know, think about sitting on some lava and some magma and going through a volcano and, you know, coming out as lava on the other side, right? Think about traveling through the circulatory system, okay? I mean, you know, think about being a molecule in different kinds of substances and different kinds of heat sources are around at different temperatures. All these things that are possible with technology, but not possible without. My second claim is, the one I said that I made at the conference, is that we can develop the kinds of curriculum, the kinds of technology platforms, their integrations for such an approach, for making the computer game-changing like that and changing education right now. It only takes will and resources. Oh, and the third point is, not saying it for my last slide, it's right here. We're only going to be able to have impact, though, if we work to help people imagine what education could be. Okay, it's not just going to come through doing things. It's also going to require helping people advance their imaginations. Who are these people who have to advance their imaginations? Well, they're us. I mean, my imagination is not completely there, right? I'm ahead of most people, but there are all kinds of things I can't imagine yet. So I think that, you know, the public, and that includes policymakers, it includes parents, it includes kids, it includes teachers, it includes researchers. Everybody's got to be able to imagine what it could be in order to work towards making it that way. So I want you to imagine, okay, and I'll show you pictures of all of these. You're a fourth grader. The room is shaking. Okay, I'll show you what that looks like in a moment. You're a 10th grader. There's this historical site that was a landmark location for school desegregation, right close, not far from your school. Maybe you want to find out what it was like for the boys, for the girls, for the African Americans, for the whites, what it was like at different times. You want to understand, maybe you want to understand how desegregation happens. How can the computer can help you do that. You're a 7th grader. The fish in the local pond are dying off. What can you do to save them? Okay. You live in rural coastal Maine or Alaska. The weather conditions and availability of fish are changing the ways fishermen in the community can make their living. The fish are in different places at different times. They're not all there. How can you help them go back to doing better? You're in college, learning about the Green Revolution. You have a chance to experience what farmers in India and Mexico have been through. How will you, based on that, how will you introduce these new crops into China? Okay, or you're a middle schooler. You get to be an ecosystem scientist, a geneticist, a mechanical engineer, a civil engineer, just a plain kid. As you learn science and engineering, that happens to be specified in all these new standards that are coming out. Okay, imagine being in those situations. Sounds like a lot more fun than the school that most of us went to, right? And I would claim that we also would have all learned a lot more, even those of us who were at the top and got all the A's and all of that. So the 4th graders, who are, maybe these are 5th graders, who are in the room when it shakes, in quotation marks. The way they make the room shake is with speakers that make a bunch of noise, okay? The room doesn't shake. But what happens, what Tom Moore is doing, is he's working on how do you bring the field into the classroom, and how do you do it in such a way that the kids, and he's talking elementary school, upper elementary school kids, that the kids can actually authentically do the same things that scientists or engineers do, and do it in such a way that it's personally meaningful to them, okay? And so they're going to get engaged in it. They're going to learn the practices of scientists and engineers along the way, and they're going to learn all this science and, you know, math and engineering and how they go together with each other. So in this particular one, the room starts shaking. And the room is set up with seismographs in 3 different parts of the room. Okay. The kids can see the output from the seismograms are the output, right? The kids get, the seismographs are the machines, seismograms are the output. The kids can see the output from them. The kids can look at the waves that go this way and the waves that go underneath and where they converge, okay? And through some calculation, okay, they can figure out how far the quake was from each one of those seismographs. And then they can triangulate from there, and they can find the epicenter, okay, and know where the earthquake is. And, you know, they put a little tab on the ceiling, you know, the way these things are. It's easy to put a little tab on the ceiling, and oh my gosh, 2 days later, it starts shaking again. And it turns out that these earthquakes are, you know, happening in particular places. And oh my God, there's something going on that's making these things happen in particular places. Like, they all seem to be right around here. They're not over there, and they're not over there. Why are they all happening over here? This is what the kids are asking. Okay, and they figure out where the plate boundaries are in the classroom. You know, the whole idea of plates, right? They figure that out. So these 3 pictures are from the old version of it. These 3 pictures are from the new version of it. You see the kids here who are playing with a, what's that table called? A shake table? Is that what you call it? And going on with it to try to understand, you know, how do you keep, what's it take for something to stay up when you got all this shaking? Okay, so so they're being seismologists and maybe civil engineers along the way, and technology is allowing them to do that. Here's the technology that lets the kids examine the historical site, and this is actually augmented reality technology, though you can't tell, but I'm telling you. Okay, so they go to the place, and they've got their laptop or their phone. Okay, basically they've got their mobile device. And if they want to find out what was going on in a classroom at a particular time in history, they adjust their mobile device, you know, and they hold it up and point it at that window in the building, you know, and they see something happening in that window. Okay, and if they want to see what was happening in that place at some other time, they hold it up and they see that. Now, if I were to use this, okay, and not having to worry about travel to a field site, okay, I would have them go and just explore the site with this thing, and then come back and have all kinds of questions and start their inquiry after that and bring them back to then do the inquiry they need to do in order to answer their questions. There are other ways to do it. You could have, in fact, I thought, but I don't know if they're actually doing it, you could have a virtual space and also have the augmented, and they could play in do their exploration first in the virtual space and then go to the augmented space and, you know, bring back what they were doing to the virtual space, whatever it is. But what you're seeing here, okay, is that they're able to see what was there in the past and at different times. And then they're also able to query the system about the people who were involved there, about why historians think it was happening that way, to see news articles from the time. I mean, there's lots of stuff connected to it. And the other thing that they can do is they can take notes. Okay, so they could take, you know, if this person, I can't read that to see who it is and I don't recognize them. But if they, you know, see a person in a particular place, you know, giving a speech, you know, they might want to take some notes about that person and drop it there in the augmented reality. And then they go back and they pick up their notes in the classroom, in the place, in the real world, in the virtual world, you know, where they took that note. They have their notes organized for them by place, and they do their historic inquiry. Eco-move, the fish are dying. How come? Okay, this one has a virtual and a augmented reality part to it. You're seeing at the top the virtual reality piece. Actually, you're seeing at the top the virtual reality. So what's happening here is the fish are dying, and you get to go into this virtual world. It's not virtual reality where you're wearing the goggles. It's a virtual world. You get to go into the virtual world and walk around in it. You see your avatar. You walk around in it, and you can see what's going on. You can talk to people. There's a person up there near that house. He's actually putting fertilizer on the grass, and you can talk to him and find it, like in Oregon Trail, right? You can talk to him and ask him some questions and find out what he's doing. You can go into the water, and these things over here at the bottom, they allow you to take measurements of various kinds in and out of the water. You can travel into the water and magnify and see what's going on, and start to explore and then to collect evidence, okay, about what's killing the fish. Now, in none of these does everything happen within that electronic world that's set up. Okay, the electronic world is giving the learners place to explore. It's giving them an experience. It's giving them place to explore, place to manipulate and see what happens. And they come back, and there's pedagogy that goes with it, and they come back and they discuss what it is they experienced, and they make sense of it. Some of these have more, these each have more and less in the software to promote the sense making. But basically the idea is that these are about having the experience. They make sense of it. This is the augmented reality version of it. They actually go out to the pond. It's the same pond. They actually go out to the pond. They see the fish, take a picture of the fish, and and then they can match it to a kind of fish and get information about it. This is a sensor here. They take a, they measure something with a sensor, and there's a ranger of some sort who's providing some scaffolding, some help, and saying, well, gee, that really seems out of range. Maybe you want to try again. So, so they can also be collecting, if they live in the neighborhood, right, be collecting evidence and exploring outside. Weather blur, I'm not going to show you the picture of weather blur, but weather blur is, oh, maybe I will. Weather blur, here is its website, is a project that's happening in the two-room schoolhouses on the rural coast of Maine and Alaska, and the community is involved in the kids' education. The fishermen take measurements, take pictures, report what's going on out at sea. They come into the classroom, talk to the kids. They tell them about what the issues are that they're experiencing. The kids are reading, they're learning about, in various ways, some of the things that are going on that the fishermen are experiencing. And they're aiming together, the fishermen and the kids, and a scientist or two in the community, and the teacher, and the parents can get involved. They're aiming to understand these issues about what's happening with climate and how that's affecting weather, and what's that mean for the fishing. And it's primarily middle school unit, but these are two-room schoolhouses. Yes, they still exist, okay? And they're really bringing everybody in the community into it. And this is just, you're seeing on the website just some of the scaffolding that they have and some of the things they have to just keep the kids engaged. Well, that won't work. I got to go back to here. I don't know why that went to a different place than I was. Okay, and finally, the last one I want to show you of these is Ola Alkvist's up there, and the other people, raise your hands, the people involved in this. Okay, now you know. I don't know everybody's name, But what they're doing is trying to help college students in geography class, you know, who are learning about the green revolution in crops, okay, to learn about the complex world through map-based games. And they have 4 or 5 students together playing roles as farmers in India. And you can see over here the plots. This player owns those plots of land, and there are particular crops that they have, and items that they can buy, more crops they can buy, water for their crops. This is another player. There's something else going on there too, but I can't read it and I don't remember. This is another player, and you see that they own cropland over there, a little farther from the water. The water's over here. I can't exactly see it. What you see over here is that, that there's been a pest attack. It happens. There's a simulator going underneath it. There's a pest attack, and everybody lost half of their crop from last year, or maybe somebody lost half of their crop. Somebody or everybody? Everyone lost half of their crop from last year. Okay, and now these guys are going, this same guy is going back and trying to figure out, well, what am I going to do? Here are resources I can buy, but how am I going to spend my money to move forward from here? The learners actually get to experience with all the, you know, not all of the emotion, with much of the emotion that, you know, that's part of the real experience, to experience what's happening to these farmers in India when these new kinds of crops that give high yield are introduced into the community. Okay, like I said earlier, and as we discussed this morning, if they can look at the way that these crops were, that putting in these new crops worked in Mexico, look at the way it worked in India, compare and contrast those, maybe they're going to be able to make recommendations about China or someplace else. Okay, the last thing, I said that was last, but the other thing I wanted to show you that's project-based is my own curriculum. And my own middle school science curriculum, in fact, has very little technology in it. The kids use, they used to use My World, now Danny Edelson's My World, now they use Google Maps and some other things to do some geography things. They use NetLogo to do some simulation and modeling, but other than that, there's very little technology in this. What there is that it's a full 3 years of middle school curriculum where students are learning and collaborating the way scientists and engineers do. So for example, the 1, 2, 3, first 4 of these are the life science units. And the first one of them, they're living the lives of ethologists for 6 weeks. Ethologists study the way that animals behave. And what their challenge is to design a zoo enclosure that will allow some animal they've studied, and they don't choose it till later, some animal they've studied to either feed or communicate the way it would in the wild and allow the zoo visitors to be able to see it. The seeing is often with cameras placed in the right places. Okay, they start off by watching some small group of themselves eat cookies and chat with each other, and they eat. This is to learn how to observe, and they each write down different observations, and they notice that there's not going to be any way that they're going to be able to, you know, use their observations as evidence when they start observing animals, as evidence for the way the animals communicate or the way that they feed, unless they find a way to all start observing the same way. So they have discussions about that, and they figure out standards. And at some point, they recognize that if they see what other people in the group, in class are doing, at some point they recognize that some of the things they're writing down there as what they observed are really just things they inferred and are not things that they actually observed. So if an animal attacks another, they might say, you know, he's angry at him, or they might say he wants to eat, you know, this one wants to eat that one. But they don't know. All they know is that the animal attacked the other animal. They've got to make an inference to know why. So they move through that. They see a lot of movies, of videos of animals doing various things, and so they start learning a little bit about adaptation. In genetics, they're working as geneticists and as, I don't know, whatever are the kinds of engineers that, that engineer new breeds. They're engineering a new breed of rice, okay, that's nutritious and can be grown in places that don't get a lot of rain. There's a story behind it. It's actually a Philippine story, but there's they're introduced to a food shortage, and anyway, in the context of answering this question, or of addressing this challenge, they learn about sexual and asexual reproduction, the Mendelian inheritance, Punnett squares, meiosis, mitosis, chromosomes, DNA, how traits are and the environment interact, evolution, natural selection, et cetera, et cetera. In this one, Good Friends in Germs, they're going to give advice. They actually make posters for the school where they give advice for good hygiene practices so they don't make each other sick. It's about cells and bacteria and viruses and body systems, and you know, how can we prevent our good friends from getting sick? And in this one, Living Together, they're giving advice to the city council in a small town in the Midwest on the Rouge River about it's a dying town, the children all leave after they finish high school, et cetera, and somebody wants to come back and build her factory there. And, you know, should they allow it? And if they allow it, what are the regulations that they should be making, you know, by putting into effect to preserve the river from pollution, to preserve the recreation and fishing downriver, et cetera. Okay, and that's their ecology unit, about water ecology. And there are 4 earth and atmospheric science units, and there are 1, 2, 3, there are 5 physical science units. In vehicles in motion, they're designing and building a vehicle. Oh, it used to be like that. Now it's a long, skinny thing that works with a propeller and a rubber band. And it needs to go straight and far. It needs to go over some hills. It needs to pull things. So it's a whole big range of different things that they're working on. And I'm showing you this because it's 3 years of middle school science curriculum. It's a whole 3 years. Okay, and in that whole 3 years, where they're working on challenges that, you know, don't say, you know, this is the energy challenge and this is the ecology this is the energy unit and this is the ecology unit and this is this unit and the chemistry unit. They're working on challenges that introduce and continue to build on the content in all of those different things. And they continue to use the practices of scientists and engineers and the ones that we devised for the classroom so they would learn. In learning. So, so those are the examples I wanted to give you, and in all of them, except PBIS because it doesn't have doesn't have the technology, but in PBIS too, maybe I shouldn't have put in PBIS except in PBIS. In every one of them, the learners are immersed in role play for the purpose of addressing missions or challenges connected to the real world. Okay, in all of them except PBIS, technology allows them to play those roles the same way professionals would. And in PBIS, we don't have all the technology. We had to find other ways for them to play roles as professionals would. And they have resources available to them that would be available to professionals working on similar projects. Resources for record keeping, for data collection, for looking things up, for sharing, exploration, trying things out, making sense, all those different things that professionals do. They have support they need for both project success and learning success. And the class time is spent primarily on two things: playing their roles to achieve their goals and sense making. And playing their roles to achieve their goals includes asking questions. It includes figuring out how we're going to get to answers. It includes designing investigation. It includes carrying them out. It includes sharing with each other and getting feedback along the way. Okay? And there's sense making about the content, about how to use it, about what do these results mean. Okay? So class time is spent on those things. Activities all afford learning disciplinary content and practices, and also learning project problem-solving, communication, and collaboration practices. And in fact, for those of you who are advanced enough in imagination for this, every one of them also affords identity work and confidence building. Okay? That's not always stuff we talk about for school. But every one of these that I showed you was school, and every one of them has affordances. Whether they're taking advantage of them or not, you know, some are, some aren't. They have affordances for that. And technology, except for in PBIS, is offering lots of different functions. I'm going to claim that it's not enough in any of them yet, right now. Okay? So I see these projects as exemplary for the future. Because they're all focused on developing deep and abiding understanding and masterful capabilities, and they all see those as incremental processes taking sustained and long time effort and often requiring a lot of help. Every one of them sees it as incremental, sustained time, sustained effort. They're not simply telling and, you know, assuming people will know. Now, the thing is, okay, and why these have the success they have, I'm not going to tell you there's whole lots of analysis of, you know, of the success of these. I can tell you that for PBIS, it's looking pretty good. We have outside people working on some evaluation, and it's looking pretty good. But one of the things that they get right is promoting and sustaining active engagement. And I like to say that promoting and sustaining an active engagement is somewhere between 50 and 80% of promoting learning. Now, I made up those numbers, okay? But people are, you know, if I say 50%, some people say to me, oh, no, it's more like 80%. So, you know, if I say 80%, people say, oh, no, it's more like 50%. Doesn't matter. The point is that promoting and sustaining active engagement is a huge, huge, huge part of fostering learning, okay? You want people to want to learn. If people want to learn, they'll get past the tedium. They'll get past the difficulty. They'll go ask for help. They'll figure out ways, okay? So you can't get to, you know, all this stuff for fostering conceptual change and all this stuff for, you know, learning, really learning the physics of impact, you know, or acceleration or whatever it is, as deeply as we want people to learn it, as correctly as we want people to learn it. They're not going to be interested. They got to be interested enough to learn it that way. Okay. So they're all big picture examples that show how to address these things. I want to tell you, and I'll go through this more quickly. You know, once people get excited, there's all this project-based learning out there in the world where they get people excited and the kids excited and the kids work on projects, and then you're not sure anymore, you know, what they learned at the end, except they did these beautiful projects. So the deal is that you can't have, you know, like I said, it's promoting and sustaining engagement is 50 to 80% of the learning, but it's not the whole thing. Okay, and you've got to get to any depth, you've got to get at the cognitive parts of it too. And there are other projects that tell us more about how to actually foster that deep understanding and masterful capabilities, how to fostering sense making. Let's just call it that. You're already aware of some technologies that do this. There are intelligent tutoring systems that you could imagine bringing into any of these projects in different places where somebody needs to learn a particular thing. I'm not a big fan of intelligent tutoring systems for learning math all year long, but I'm a big fan of take little bits and pieces of using intelligent tutoring systems for particular things somebody wants to learn right then and there. Simulation software, modeling software, scaffolding embedded in the technology, support for collaboration. So, I mean, these are things that have been out there for a long time. But I want to help you imagine a couple other things that can be done with technology in terms of supporting sense-making, supporting deepening one's understanding, getting better at capabilities. So the first one I want to talk about is, acting it out. Role play, but a different kind of role play. Not role play as in I'm playing the part of a geologist, but role play, I'm playing the part of a bee. And there's the old bee, and there's the new one, the new bee. Okay, and this is a very nicely crafted bee puppet. And it happens to have some sensors on it, and it happens to have a display. So the display, oh, that's the hive display. But the bee displays the nectar that it's holding. The hive, there's the hive, no hive in there. The hive displays the nectar that it's holding. And the flowers, some of those have nectar in them, some of them don't have nectar in them. And when the bee goes up to a flower, it can get the nectar from the flower, or if there's no nectar, not get any nectar, fly back to the hive, deposit the nectar in the hive, and so on. And what the kids can see with these e-puppets, right, is that they can see the amount of nectar in the bee, that the bee is holding, changing over time, with their actions. They can see the amount of nectar in the hive changing as they deposit nectar. And they also experience the hard work of going out there and collecting the nectar. Okay? So one of the things that happens is the kids go out and they collect nectar and they come back and they deposit it in the hive and they find that there were some flowers that had nectar and some that didn't, and they say, that's really hard work. So many of the flowers don't have nectar. How do the bees know which ones to go to? And of course, you get to talk about the bee dance at that point. And then they could invent a bee dance. What are the things, they just have the experience. What are the things that the bee dance has to express? They can invent a bee dance. They can go out and collect nectar again, this time communicating with each other with the bee dance that they created, and see how different it is, and they can learn about what the actual bee dance is, after that. So they're acting it out in order to make sense of what's actually happening. There's all this invisible stuff happening, what's actually going on. Here's another one. I'm sorry, you can't, oh, you see it, maybe see it just fine. So here's another one where they're acting it out. In this one, the kids in the room are molecules, okay? And the display, which you can't see, okay, is showing the kids moving around the room. All they have are like 3 or 4 of the cameras that the Wii uses, and 3 of the cameras that the Wii uses in the class, and they can follow, I don't know, 6 or 7 or 8 kids at a time. And here you see the kids moving around as gas, and here you see the kids close together and being a solid, okay? And they act it out, and they see at the same time, they got multiple representations, they see at the same time what's going on with molecules. There's a version of this in which I could tell you it's here, but I'd be lying and you wouldn't know. There's a version of this in which the bonds between the molecules are shown, and they can, move around like that and see how close or far. You have to be, before you're actually, attached in some way. And that could help them understand the differences between liquid and gas, right? Between liquid and gas. Okay, so there's acting it out. Collaborative sketching, I won't show you. But what if you could, you could be at a table together and collaboratively draw what you think something means, or collaboratively work like that, or be at your tablet drawing something, see it up there, and then say, oh, wait a minute, there's something from that one over there I want to incorporate into mine, and move it over. So that's another way of doing sense making. Collaborative argumentation, I'm not going to tell you about. This one's kind of neat. This one I love. Ola knows that I have. Anybody else here I funded when I was at NSF? Ola knows that there's some of my projects that I just love. So this is another one I just love. And I didn't put the name of the person working on it, Michelle Wilkerson-Jerd. She's at Tufts. And the kids are trying to make sense of evaporation. And you can't tell. It doesn't matter. But, the thing that's really hard about evaporation is that there's no boiling that they see, and yet the puddles disappear, right? So they have some ideas about what's happening, and they begin by just drawing their picture of it. And then they take their picture, and they use it to make animations, to make their own animations of it, stop-action animations. And once they make their stop-action animations and they make them to look the way they want them to look, then they start putting the relationships between all the pieces into a modeling program. They can run their models, and they can look at the stop action they did, and they can also look outside when puddles are evaporating, okay? And they can do this kind of bifocal, or in this case, trifocal modeling, looking at several different instances and how they're similar and different from each other, and modify their understanding, modify the model that they're making of it, right, which is basically their understanding as they go along. Okay. So there also are several student scientist platforms that people have built. I'm not going to show you those. That basically integrate a bunch, maybe I should, that basically integrate a bunch of different functionalities at once. So what you're seeing there is not just a couple different representations of the same thing, okay? But you're seeing means of exploring something qualitatively, exploring something quantitatively, having them connected to each other. Being able to integrate, you can't see it, but integrate what's going on in the real world with something with what you see, again, what you see in a simulation of it. Taking notes in there, you've got making reports coming out of there. So, so those are some examples of sense making. Okay, so the first set of all the different pieces of software I showed you, okay, they all illustrate what wholes could look like, W-H-O-L-E. And when you're doing this kind of project-based learning, or problem-based, or design-based, or mission-driven, whatever you want to call it, there's not really too much in the way of lessons, right? There's not the teacher standing up and lecturing like I'm doing. There's not that. I mean, it's a lot more of experiencing things and discovering them and asking questions. There's doing investigation, there's reading, there's discussing things, and there may very well be lessons where a teacher says, we're going to do this particular thing, and a teacher stands up and lectures. But it's more like a flow of activity, a natural flow of activity, than it is a teacher saying, today we'll do this, tomorrow we'll do that. Of course, if you're doing it in a classroom, you have a certain amount of time. The teacher has to make it move along, but it's a whole different kind of thing. So activities are in the context of challenges. Lessons, as there are, would be in the context of activities. Lectures will be for purposes identified by learners, short and impromptu, maybe recorded and available to watch together, or interactive. They might not even be the teacher standing up and reading like lectures will be for purposes already identified by learners. We need to learn about this. Okay, so that's what that whole first set I showed you is emphasizing, but they were mostly not whole. They were moving in that direction, but most were technology-rich individual units, all the technological ones, but were not technologically complete, and more problematic, they never thought about full coverage. It was just individual units. PBIS coherently covers a whole 3 years, but it's technology poor and doesn't take advantage of all the things it's not as rich an experience as those other ones were. Okay, and none of them, of course, integrate assessment in ways that you could integrate assessment if you're using technology well. So the second set showed nifty, useful technologies, each promoting learning in ways that would not be possible without the computer. Some of them were disciplinary, some cross-disciplinary. There was support for a lot of different learning activities. But each one of those, even the platforms, were only providing pieces of what you want to provide. There's no integrated whole, okay, of curriculum that extends over time and technology that supports it, okay? But all of this suggests that learning scientists and learning technologists could have a big impact on the future of education if we make it a goal, okay? And that future of education would make project-based, problem-based, design-based approaches easier to carry out and where more kids learn and are engaged. That future education would afford experiences with all kinds of complex phenomena, processes, situations not otherwise possible, would afford collaborative activity not otherwise easily possible. Think about the fishermen, and will provide infrastructure for disciplinary inquiry and project work and for identity development. But we have to make it a goal. And I think that, So learning scientists and technologists could have a big impact on the future of education if we make it a goal. And what is that goal going to be? I don't have a good header on this. Well, the goal is to integrate technological functions that that afford project work, inquiry, collaboration, and reflection, that encourage and invite learning from experience pedagogy, with curriculum units that provide coherent coverage over time. I think what we'll need to do is allow adaptability for local opportunities and needs, and I'm calling that macro adaptability. Now, I'm one of those people in education who really hates this idea of these large trials, blind trials that everybody loves for some reason. In medicine, they don't tell us which medicines to use for which people either. The same way they're not going to tell us how to adapt curriculum to work in particular, or pedagogy to work in particular places. We need to design with adaptability in mind, but nobody actually knows how to do, and then do the assessments, do the evaluations, looking at things that are adapted appropriately rather than looking at anything that's one size fits all. But we don't know how to do that yet. But it will have to be done for these complete wholes. They need to be designed in developmentally appropriate ways, keeping in mind what we know about learning and what we know about sustaining motivation and engagement. They need to have assessment capabilities built in smart ways, and not just for accountability reasons, but also to foster self-assessment, to guide scaffolding, and to help teachers have a snapshot of where the class is. That's going to have to be included in these wholes. So that education, okay, is a place, we'll have classrooms, will be places for addressing challenges together, and learning will be purposeful, assessment will be purposeful, learning technologies will be designed and used in purposeful ways. That will get us pretty far. I would say that's, a good place to start. We're going to need to worry about adaptations for every learner not being interested in the same things and not every learner capable of the same things. But, you know, there's so much talk about hyper-personalization. You know, out there in the education world. Hyper-personalization forgets all the important things that we know about people having experiences and about the social kinds of interactions that are needed for learning. So my claims are that except for my claims at the end now, except for the adaptability parts of this future and this thing that I say needs to be done, and our understanding of how to integrate disciplines with each other, you can ask me what I mean by that if you want afterwards. We know how to do these things. And so I think that the issues are will and resources. And I think that those resources and the real transformations that could happen are only going to happen if we fire up the public imagination. So that's it.
Near the start of the talk, when you mentioned collaborative argumentation, I really perked up because.
Oh, and then I didn't say anything about it.
Then you said I'm going to skip over that. So that is such a downer. Can you say anything about how?
Yeah. So there's this this software that they're working on at Pittsburgh, and they taped all this, so you'll see the slides. It's Kevin Ashley, and Kevin Ashley's enough for you to know. And they're using AI in the ways that they can to interpret arguments and argument plans, and then connecting peers in ways so that peers play the roles that the computer can't play. And what they're doing, and I mean, they talk about making it work for other genres as well, other genres of writing, other genres of interacting as well. So this is all written. They're writing arguments, and they're doing it in law, and they're doing it in science, and they're doing it in something else too. I can't remember. And they begin them with a framework of, you know, a framework for the argument. So the first thing they have to do is they have to lay out the argument in a graph. And of course, you know, computer can easily do graph analysis and, you know, figure out if there are some pieces that are needed in the graph. So the computer does that, and then the peers can look and talk about the content of what's in there. When they get to the writing, because they know what the arguments are going to be about, the computer can do some analysis of language. I mean, it can certainly do some analysis of the kinds of language you use in making a point, right? And then it can do some analysis of the content, because it knows what content it's about. And so it does that, and then peers can do it. So they've got this back and forth between the computer and the arguer, the peers and the arguer, you know, doing that for both parts of making the argument. And it's really, I mean, it's also a project in learning how to distribute scaffolding between computer, peers, and teacher. You know, what are the things that the person who actually knows more really has to do? Questions? There got to be more questions.
Good question. In looking at this vision, I'm wondering where you see the locus of actually the activity happening. Is it in the classroom with the teacher who's going to be implementing these things, or is it going to be publishers or groups who disseminate things to buy that solve?
Okay, so there are a set of teachers who are, Kathy knows one of them who's very angry at me. There are a set of teachers who are angry at me when I say, wait a minute, nobody's teaching teachers how to write curriculum. And they're certainly not teaching them how to do it over long periods of time so that you get coherence, right? So I really hate this idea of every teacher putting their stuff up on Edutopia or whatever it is, and every other teacher, you know, taking from that. there's some diamonds in there, but mostly it's rough. So, so I really hate that, okay? My view is, I mean, I'm envisioning that just like I'm the lead author on this middle school curriculum that goes 3 years, I'll be the lead author on the several next editions of it, but next editions that will give us a whole 3 years of stuff. But I don't think that we want to force people to use just that. I mean, I think that once you have a structure there, and then a publisher would publish that, right? That once you have a structure there, then you want to think about how to, not just how to adapt, but how to pull things in and out. So for example, the ecology unit right now deals with this town on the Rouge River, right? But the fish are dying in, wherever that lake was in Boston, right? A pond in Boston. That was Chris Deede's. And there's no reason why you can't also make it happen in some local lake, right? If you've got the right stuff available for it, right? And you could make a similar challenge work in lots of different places, or you can make a whole other unit. I think there are big advantages in using things like EcoMove to do this, because if you're actually living in, this is one of my hypotheses, if you're living in the EcoMove environment and you're getting really attached to those fish and keeping them alive, then when you come back and you do the climate unit, you could come back and, you could have something in there where all of a sudden the fish are dying off again. You gotta go deal with it now. The water's a different temperature. What are you gonna do, right? Things change, and you're connecting sciences to each other, right? Or when you're doing the air quality unit, which I didn't show you, that one goes into molecules. This one isn't so much about molecules, right? You can connect those together too. So, so I see publishers, I see designers, researchers, designers, teams, whoever the teams of people are who are putting together units, writing them to fit into sequences that are there, so that they kind of have they can take from things that might come before them and give to things that come after them. But I don't see it being individual teachers, and I don't see it totally being researchers, because that's not what researchers did. I mean, when I made that 3 years of curriculum happen, I basically gave up research for several years to do it. So it's just not what we do. There were questions back there.
Yeah, I was just wondering, the idea of making these complex experiences for students is probably more future-looking compared to what is going on now, because of testing standards and things like that. So I'm just wondering what your
first of all, I want to finish answering this question because I forgot. It's going to be teams of people working on these things, and researchers are going to have to be on those teams who are writing these units and making them happen, because we've got to make sure that they're based on what we know about learning. So I didn't want to say researchers aren't going to do it. I just meant it's not going to happen primarily from the research organizations. The future, this is all about the future. I mean, I think my view of it is that we're not going to change anything for the future unless we help people envision what the future is. So there are some places that, there will be places that are willing to put things in place, and to, there are places that get permission to bypass the exams. Okay, so I think what we have to do is find those places, the willing, and have coalitions of the willing making these things happen. And help people see it. So yeah, I mean, EHR at NSF tends to fund for the near future. They do very little funding of things that are farther away than a few years. My program at NSF, cyber learning, was about 10, 15 years out. It wasn't, we weren't going, most of these came from my program. I didn't want to fund anything that was real close in, because we really wanted to explore what's possible and explore what's possible and get ready for that future. And then I think with all the integration, I think that, you can always find places to try out little stuff you're doing. But I think with respect to the big things I'm talking about, we have to do the same thing. We've just got to find the places that are ready and willing and do it.
I think we better.
Oh, I was going to take one more. Let me take one more.
Last one.
Thank you so much. I better make this good, right? You mentioned that we need teams to come together, researcher, instructor, designer, and so forth. Do you have any good ideas on how to get these teams started? Like, if I'm excited about this particular idea, how do I go about finding
Okay, so there is an organization that we funded from NSF called Circle, C-I-R-C-L. No E on the end. Circle, CIRCL.org. One of the things that they're supposed to be doing is setting up an infrastructure online for matchmaking. Okay, so go send them an email, ask them what they can help you with. I love being a matchmaker, so you can ask me also. And I think we'll get, I happen to know, because I was at NSF, that there's money given out to start making that kind of matchmaking happen. And I also suggest people go to learning sciences conferences. AERA, it's harder to find people because it's so big. But, I suggest people, without the E.
without the E?
Yeah.
C-I-R-C-L.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Please join me again in thanking Dr. Kolodner.